We're hearing some listener stories in this one. Real people just like you and me. Let's do it. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Game Industry Job Hunt Podcast. This is episode 6, and today is a special one. I'm pretty excited about this one. Today we're hearing from real job hunters, just like you and me. We've got a couple of friends of the show here from our community, our growing community, that have agreed to share their stories with me here on the podcast, and I am very grateful to them. Before we jump into that, please make sure to check out GameIndustryJobHunt.com for, links, resources, all kinds of fun stuff, as I always say here. Check that out. It's good stuff. You'll be glad you did. Also, wherever you're listening to the show, leave us a good review, okay? Help us keep this thing going. We need good reviews to grow and spread the show and spread the word, so you guys can help with that. And if you do, it's greatly appreciated. But you listening is more than enough, and that's appreciated as well. So with that, let's dive into our first episode of Listener Stories. All right, everybody, we're here with my friend Kai DeLeon. Kai, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome. This is exciting for me to finally be doing one of these community stories episodes. I'm pretty excited about this. So I'm glad you're here. Tell everybody about yourself. Tell us your story. Kind of give us the background and the context on everything Kai.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited to be here, Joe. I know we were talking right before the show that we got some really good mutual friends in common who are high quality people. So I've been really excited for this. So thanks for the opportunity. It feels weird and crazy to be the first community story. But yeah, so I'm Kai DeLeon. I've been in the games industry. This will be year 6 or 7. I got into the games industry. My first job was we were at the same studio. My first role was QA at Gearbox Software, which was really cool. Nice. From there, cut my teeth on AAA, releasing a pretty big game in I think that released 2019. Experienced my first layoff in 2020. Have since experienced 2 other layoffs in the intervening time through my tough grit and soft demeanor. I'm not sure. I've had, layoffs aren't always our fault. And I think that's something that I've definitely learned after I've been through 3 of them.
Almost never.
Yeah, so I've bopped around a little bit of everything. I've kind of fallen into release management and production as my real bread and butter. I've done some micro indie where we had internally developed projects, and then I ran our publishing department, and all told in-house there was 6 people, including myself, releasing games I think we had Thursday releases, and so we were technically releasing every week, but I think because of the pandemic stuff, hit a cadence of it would either be 2 or 3 games every 2 weeks. Sometimes it would be a game every week, but we did our best, so it was cool. I did a lot of publishing there, and I just left a contract with Epic self-publishing tool, so a lot of my release management stuff has also been really focused on getting games out the door, and especially getting indie games out the door and figuring out what is the barrier to release for a lot of developers. So that's my professional angle. I've done a little bit of everything is what I'd like to say, and I think really important to my experience in game design is that I worked pretty much every crappy job you can imagine before getting into games. I waited tables, I did cold call sales, I did tech and telecommunications for a long time. Some of the best jobs I've worked didn't pay very well, but they were working with kids. I was a nanny. I've worked at a daycare. I've been a mentor for a long time with kiddos and children and stuff. I've worked with small businesses locally. So part of my story and adventure into game dev has been I was grinding, I was hustling, I was doing a lot of independent stuff, contract stuff, stuff that was I'm just going to go help someone organize their individually run small business for the next 4 weekends, and they're going to pay me what they can afford, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help get this business in a better working order for them. And that was a lot of stuff. That was logistics, that was tax work, that was a lot. So I've worn a bunch of hats, and ironically enough, game dev has actually been the most stable of all of my careers. Like, I've worked in telecom, I worked in sales, I've worked with kids, and games, my first QA job at Gearbox Software was the most stability and the most that I was ever paid at a job. Period. I don't know if do you disclose like how much people make? I personally am very open with like how much I get paid and how much I've been paid historically.
This
But
is
because
the
we
first time. This is the first time we've done a interview like this, so I
cool,
have no issue with it if you don't.
then I think just something that in my experience is being open about our pay is something that people struggle with. And I'm of two minds because like I was raised very, I mean, I'm from Texas. My parents were like, your purse is your business and nobody else's. The only people like your medical needs, the only people that need to know about your money is your partner, your family and family, very close family, and whatever professional is giving you advice that you are paying to give advice. So in that regard, I think your general finances, it is really good to keep them personal. I think for building community in this industry and especially just knowing kind of how predatory a lot of stuff can be across so many different metrics, being open about our compensation is the only way that we can really protect each other. Or it's one of the first ways we can really start to protect each other. And something that I love to tell all of my teams, all my coworkers, all my friends, all my peers, people I pass on the street, you are federally protected to discuss your wage. Anybody telling you, especially your boss or especially management, telling you that you should not be discussing your wage, they're breaking federal law. You are protected to discuss how much you individually are making. No one can tell you you cannot disclose your wage to someone else. So, in that regard, my first job in the games industry, I was paid $10 an hour to do QA for a AAA game. And that job was grueling. It had a lot of its own stories. I mean, we were there at the same time, so we know that there was a lot that has changed since, but there was also pretty endemic of the industry at large. And like, it was a crazy experience. I'm very thankful for it. I've made some of my best friends in that regard. One of my closest friends, actually, one that we talked about a little bit before the show, my favorite J King. We actually, our friendship, we both talk about, like, we got hired together. You know what? I'm gonna out us both because we think this is cute. We were hired together, fired together. So we were both in the same layoff. Our first day, we signed our first day paperwork together. And she had years of experience in the industry that I didn't, and this was my first industry job. But one of our first moments of like building a relationship with each other, which now this is my best friend. This is my professional confidant. This is my mentor, someone that I owe a lot to. When we were signing our paperwork, there were some inaccuracies that were like discrepancies between like what we were offered and what we were given, and we were able to figure that out because she very politely was like, "Do you mind me asking how much they're offering you?" And I told her, I was like, "Yeah, here's they offered me $10. If they offered you more and they've given you a paperwork $10, like, girl, get your money." And that moment, like, we had a conversation, and maybe we cut out a couple of these details in the full version, but like I even held my paperwork and was like, "No, I don't need to sign anything until she gets a new copy." Like something as simple as saying, "No, I'm not going to sign it and hand this to you. You're not going to make her sign it and like take it with you and say you'll get a new copy later." Like, no, we're not in a hurry. It's our first day. I can wait for you to get an updated copy that is accurate and correct, and you can bring it back. And that little bit of solidarity goes a long way. So I point to that a lot in terms of like, that's how we protect each other. And now I'm like, wow, this is one of my biggest girl bosses, one of my best friends, one of my biggest advocates, that just taking that moment to be like, my paperwork isn't so important that I can't wait for yours to be corrected. That little moment of like sticking up for each other and allyship and camaraderie goes a really long way. And I've seen that
really
through big and small stuff at a bunch of different places. So I've meandered a little bit, but I think I've kind of laid the groundwork of like, I've done a lot of stuff. People first is also something that I very much believe in. And so, yeah, I could talk about a lot. I think community is kind of where some of the stuff I said I want to talk about, it all kind of comes back to that. That's kind of my thing for 2025, is focusing more on community and building it with the tools that I have at my disposal. And kind of looking at like the art industry and like our fellow devs with that in mind has been an interesting one. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So with your job hunt, how long have you been on the job hunt this time around?
This time around, I was laid off at the end of September. So I've been looking for, that's like 3 going on 4-ish months, which I knew when I was laid off that it was going to be a little bit because September into October, I was already really busy. And then I knew that after October, the odds that November, December, I was going to see anything, pretty low. So I've kind of been holding steady, and I'm getting into like truly like digging in and applying, like, that difference between passively applying and actively applying for stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of was waiting for the new year to roll around because, woo, life has been crazy.
Yeah, well, the holidays hit, and that's insane for everybody,
Yeah.
And then, like you said, that one of the great things about the game industry is just the time off around the holidays. Usually it's like you're getting a free week at least. And so at that point, yeah, sure, if you're really trying to stay busy and get ahead, there are some things you can do. But I know for me, my wife was off the past couple of weeks, and my plan was just kind of try to enjoy the time as much as I could and kind of, treat it like, sort of pretend like I was on vacation too, in a sense. And, just sort of enjoy the downtime as much as I could, and then kind of come back, starting this week, refreshed and ready to go. 3 times in 5 years is tough, right? What is it about the games industry that makes you feel like it's worth it to keep plugging away in order to stay in it?
So I have kind of 2 different opinions that come together to kind of keep me at it. And I think that it starts with games jobs are not the only ones I'm applying to. We talked a little bit earlier about like my weird experience level of like the average quote unquote veteran dev has about 6 to 7 years experience, or at least that's like the life cycle of a game dev career is generally on average people work 6-7 years in the games industry. Mm-hmm. So now that I'm sitting at about 6-7 years, like I got to do the math of like traditionally like pre 2020 it's kind of a 50-50, I would say, of like you stay and hope that you get something and continue moving forward, and you build that deeper well of understanding and that longevity into your career, or you take the experience you have and you pivot to something else and maybe hope that you come back to games. Mm-hmm. And so now, like, I sit and I look at my competition in the job pool, in the market, is people that have 15 to 20 years experience, not just people that are breaking into games. Like, I've seen a lot of the conversation around, like, breaking into games, quote unquote, change, because we're all really aware that there's not a lot of entry level when they can, unfortunately, underpay more senior talent. Yeah. So on one side, I think that we have to be realistic of, like, I'm applying to jobs because I have as much experience here in the games industry as I have in a lot of other stuff. Like I said, I did a lot of work before I got into games. I've been a working professional for 11, 12 years now. So games is half my career. So on the one hand, it's being realistic. We do have to apply to some stuff outside. But separately, I am a big firm believer of you don't have to stop looking at games jobs at any point either. Like, our industry loves an underdog. We love a return. We love a comeback. Everybody loves, some of my favorite coworkers have the coolest stories of like, yeah, I worked in, my favorite was, he did security, like cybersecurity for like sensitive, clearance type stuff.
Yeah.
Like locations. And it's like, why did you come into games? He's like, because that was really stressful. And I'm too young to be having that kind of stress.
I can imagine.
And like, right. And like people that, like, have been in games and then they go and they do business, or they go do a different kind of entertainment, or they go into like something very traditional, and then they come back to games because they're like, I love games. Like, our industry loves that. And so I think the fluidity of like game dev keeps me, and like the stubbornness keeps me, but at the same time, like, where else can we like build ourselves, right? Like in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, I've got stuff that I'll apply to that's not games, but like games has so much room. Like, you never know when the right games role is going to hit, and you never know, like, for all of its for all the ways that this is unhealthy and unfair to applicants, the idea that you can apply to something well out of your range and maybe still be what they're looking for, or maybe you apply to something that doesn't sound like it's going to measure up to what you expect and it ends up being what you are looking for. Like, every studio is different, and what every studio needs is different. And especially like as a producer, as someone in release management, like, the problems are all unique, but the the way we figure them out is the same. The problem solving is the same everywhere. And I feel like bringing that confidence is something that a lot of teams need, and it's something that I have been told I'm pretty good at, of bringing like a sense of it's going to be okay, we're going to get it done. Like that reassurance, I think, is really important to people as well.
Yeah, that's very important.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stubbornness to it. There's a lot of just, I'm going to keep applying until I get something in here or I get something not in games, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And also, something that I think is under talked about, or like it's not really discussed a lot in our industry, is the privilege of being a game dev. Of like, I've had a lot of jobs before game dev. Like I've known, like as a game dev and pre being a game dev, I've known what it's like to go hungry. I've known what it's like to be scared and to like not have financial stability. And on the one hand, games has brought me that, but it also comes with its own kind of financial instability. And so I stubbornly like, I look at it and I know that like I can keep applying to game dev jobs. Like game dev as a career, like you said earlier, we just got to build a little bit of something and hold out. And like that is a much easier place to start from, and it is a much more comfortable place to figure out than whenever I was waiting tables, when I was looking at fast food options and retail work. And like I have people in my life that are very near and dear to me that do retail work and do like gig work, and that's a different kind of stress. So I'm very thankful for the career that I have, and I will say that like that's something I don't think I see enough from conversations about like layoffs and stuff, is like I like to say this is the best my worst has ever been. Like the floor that I'm working on of like where my safety net is, what does my worst day look like, being mindful of like my blessings. Yeah. This is the best my life has ever been. As like 3 layoffs in, we just got notice that we had to move out of our house a week before Christmas. So like I said, I'm in the middle of moving, which is why we have the fun screen behind me. Like, and it doesn't feel good. It's not comfortable. But at the same time, I've worked really hard to like build something out of what I have and make sure that I have that regardless of like what the job is going to offer me, which is something that I think is really important. Is like we look at our lives not just as like being a game dev is everything, my job is everything. Like our jobs can mean a lot. Our jobs are really important. And especially when we're making games, like I love how seriously we take the impact that games have on people, because we've all been there and we know what that community is like. But at the same time, I don't know, sometimes I get a little bit frustrated when the conversation goes in regards to like, hey guys, if you have only ever worked in games, if your first job out of college, which starting off, you have a college degree, you were able to get a degree in game design, game dev, whatever it might be, you like having a degree is already something that like, that's very common in our industry in a way that like, I think people take for granted. And like, as someone who doesn't have a degree, but like I've done a lot of really great work. I've made a lot of stuff from scratch. Like I know I have the skills to do stuff. I had to work instead of finish college, because that's what being hungry makes you do. So I don't know. That's like, it's a lot of spite, but it's also a lot of hope. It's being thankful for what I've got and also being stubbornly like, well, if I'm not the loudmouth saying the things that I have to say, is anybody going to say them? And there's been a fun and rewarding thing in my experience. Like I've had a lot of coworkers that have told me that having someone that's not afraid to speak up and not afraid to push back on like preconceived notions or on leadership's opinions or what have you, has made them feel safer and has made them feel heard, and that they appreciate that. So that's the other thing that keeps me going, is I'm like, well, it's not just for me, it's for the people that I've worked with who I owe it to like expect better of people, even if it means I get laid off 3 times because being a loud ethnic woman with brightly colored hair and a vibrant personality makes that target really big when you're not afraid to tell your bosses that they need to improve on how they manage stuff and on their leadership and on their communication. And like, I don't know, I find myself to be someone who expects, if I wouldn't do it myself, I can't expect it of someone else. But if I do expect it of myself, I expect that leadership holds themselves to a high standard as well. And that's been a fun endeavor in this industry, I will say.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, talking about one thing you said there that really resonates with me is just being mindful of sort of what your situation really is, and how bad things are. And, in some cases, things are really dire for people, and I've seen some stories that are, admittedly really scary. But
Yeah.
that's one thing that I also try to keep in mind is just the idea that it can always be worse, and rather than make too much of kind of where we are in the negative, focus more on the positive, and then let's try to kind of, see how we move forward.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah, and on those stories too, because like we could talk, I could talk for hours about stuff like that in this industry of how common it is for people to not be able to make ends meet, especially, and I'm certainly biased, but especially in QA, especially contracted external positions. Like I've worked with a lot of external contractors. I've been an external contractor. Like I've been QA, I've worked with QA, and there's a lot of departments in our industry that are underappreciated and undervalued. And something that also keeps me in here is knowing that for every inch I make in my career, that's a little more advocacy I can lend to those people on one hand of saying, hey, let me get into a position where I can say our QA needs to be paid more. Hey, let me get into a position where it's like, hey, this quote is not appropriate for the work that our external partners are doing. Let's pay them a little bit more. Like if I can do that, that is materially beneficial to people. And then separately, if I can get to a place where I am financially secure enough to help support others, like that's something important to me. I mean, you've had a lot of folks come on here and talk about communication and networking and sharing people's posts and boosting stuff so that folks are seen. And I think that that's something we all can and should do. So that's also something that keeps me logging into LinkedIn, because like I don't think a lot of us get on and are as excited as some folks that get on and are really good at making LinkedIn their job. Because like I think that's a skill. I think that's important. Like I think that people that know how to use LinkedIn and have that advice and like that is really good. Yeah. I've found I'm not one of those people. Like I've found that I go in, I do my best, I apply to jobs, I connect with people. But I find for me personally, the stuff that I'm doing in the real world is more validating for me, and it just doesn't stress me out as much, of like, by in the real world, I mean like community building, like trying to coordinate, meet people in real meet space and talk about things, trying to go to socials. So
I really think that IRL, so to speak, that kind of work, that networking work is, that is super valuable because you're making a real world connection with somebody. And I still think you can make great connections online virtually, but there is definitely something different. I mean, the friends that I have in the industry that, I really without a doubt know this person is my friend, they're more times than not, it's somebody that I've had some sort of in-person interaction with. And funny enough, in many cases, it may not even be that many interactions. It's not like we've known each other for years and years. It's just that, we connected a couple of times at an industry show or whatever, and now we're friends, So I think I think you're on the right track there in a big way. I really do. Because like you said, LinkedIn isn't for everybody. And that's, it can be tough to, I try to do as much as I can on LinkedIn, but then I find myself invariably every week, like, okay, what can I post this week that's going to sort of, help that presence and sort of show what I'm about and show me as far as my job hunt goes, help me as far as my job hunt goes, things like that. And that's tough. That's a lot of brain work, to be thinking about. So it's not for everybody. It's really not.
Well, I think you're on a really good path of like, you've built something, and like, even if LinkedIn wasn't something that you were good at, which you're very good at it, like for what it's worth, like you're very effective and a wonderful person to talk to in real life. So it's like, bam, 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 win, win.
Your check is in the mail.
Thanks, Joe. But like building your podcast, doing this, I think is also really good, because like that's something I ran into over the years, is going like, I'm a producer and a release manager, but it feels weird to take credit for the games I've released in some ways, because like when I worked on the self-publishing tool, it feels weird to be like, yeah, I've managed thousands of games at a time. I have released hundreds of games, because like the extent to which I support and touch them is important, but it's like, I don't want to take credit for someone else's game. Yeah. And so I started looking at what am I building and like, what do I have to point to? Because like as a producer, what's your portfolio? A bunch of Jira tickets, a Confluence page. And so like I've tried to pivot and show that like I can produce my own stuff. Like I dropped my first YouTube video
There
before
you
the end of
go.
last year.
There you go.
Because that was something I wanted to do for myself. That was something I wanted to
Yeah.
prove that like I'm gonna complete it. And so like focusing on building stuff. Like what is the thing you want to make? Whether that's gonna go in a portfolio or not, like that's been a huge boon to my recovery from the burnout of being a game dev and also being laid off 3 times.
Yeah, really quick. Let me tell you a little story that kind of speaks to that taking credit
Yes,
thing.
please.
I did another interview for another thing. I don't know. It was a couple weeks ago, I think. I can't remember if it was a podcast or there's also this sort of community management event that I did an interview for, and one of the things that I talked about was this story that happened when I worked at Gearbox, and I hadn't been there very long, so I was still very much kind of the new kid on the block, and wanting to kind of know my place and stay in my lane and that kind of thing. And one night I walked out of the office, and you having worked at Gearbox, you'll know sort of
Yeah.
you for those that don't know, you sort of walk out of the Gearbox office, and kind of straight ahead is there's like the drive through there, and straight ahead is the parking garage where everybody parks, and then there's there was a coffee shop there, and then the restaurant right there, Nerdvana. And so I walk out the door, and I had been there a little bit late that night, I guess, for some reason, and I kind of walked out the door, and these two people kind of approached me. And they were sort of excited, and they were kind of they sort of approached me and sort of said, "Hey, we're really big Borderlands fans, and we just wanted to say thank you." Got my dogs barking in the background. Oh well, we'll leave that in.
I was
Whatever.
so afraid you were gonna say
Whatever.
fans.
No, so they kind of walk up to me and they say, "Hey, look, we're huge Borderlands fans. We just wanted to say thank you for your work on Borderlands. Like it's meant so much to us in our life, and all these things." And like I don't know, maybe there were a couple, because as we heard stories like that a lot. Like, oh, my boyfriend and girlfriend, and we met playing Borderlands or whatever. And so in the moment, trying to be modest and trying to not take credit for work that I didn't feel like I had done,
Right.
I sort of said to them, "Oh, well, I didn't work on Borderlands. I came here since that, and blah blah blah, and all this kind of thing." And again, I had the best intentions, but when I told them that, I saw their faces just sort of immediately drop, kind of
Yeah.
like, "Oh," and immediately in that moment, I realized it's more important to hold up that feeling that they have by by saying you're welcome on behalf of the team. You could still say, "Hey, we're so glad you play. Thank you so much. The team really worked hard. The team really loves it when folks like you come by and see us," whatever. I could have done all kinds of things, but again, I was new and I didn't realize, what I was doing. I thought I was doing the right thing and I had the best intentions, but that's one of those things, kind of for you or for anybody out there, don't be afraid to take credit on behalf of your team for something, because you never know who it is that you're sort of continuing to build up by doing that.
Yeah.
Or who you might be kind of deflating a little bit, like I did, unintentionally, by sort of trying to be overly modest and say, well, and kind of get inside baseball, like I actually only did this and this and this, not that, and like they don't care about that. They just love the work that your team did.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to sort of, in your own mind, on behalf of the team, go with that and kind of play ball with them there and sort of say like, "Oh, hey, that's so great. Yeah, we really appreciate it." Going
Yeah.
back to that "we" is always good. That always works.
The
So
royal we is very
anyway,
powerful.
for whatever that's worth to you or anybody listening, there's that little tidbit of advice. So as we sort of wrap things up here, Kai, speaking of advice, what's something you've learned over the past few months that you would sort of want to impart to fellow job seekers in the games industry? A little tip from Kai.
Yeah, so I think the biggest lesson that I've learned, and especially has been driven home in the last few months, like I think this is something I've learned over each of my layoffs. Rest, fill your cup, and unfortunately, I think something we need to all be honest with ourselves about is, unfortunately, it is unlikely that any job in any industry in any sector is going to be as loyal to you as an individual worker than they are going to be to pretty much anything else, but particularly their bottom line. So, like, something that I've had to work really hard on, and that I'm very thankful I learned that lesson before this layoff, because again, layoff was rather recent. I had a lot of other stuff that was more difficult. The layoff was one of the easiest things I've dealt with in the last few months, is something I'll say. Like, since September, that has been the thing I've stressed out the least about, because I had learned a lot in other stuff and I had bigger things going on. So decentering how much our work is directly tied to like our individual like self-worth, I think is really big.
Yeah.
And replacing some of those like external needs for validation with building up yourself as a person, looking at the community and the life that you're building with yourself and being honest and genuine. Like, the more that I've done that, the better I've been. Like, when I look at myself and I'm proud of who I see, and I know that I have done the best that I can, and I know that I stand on the work that I've done, the words that I've said, the way that I treat people. Like, one of my proudest things is that the vast majority, I would, like, if I'm being very honest and I'm removing my humility that is very hard for me to take off, I think all of my coworkers I've worked with would say that I care about people, and that I will advocate for people, and that I am a good person to work with, and that I care a lot. And I think perhaps some of my managers would receive that care and that desire to support and advocate for other people as other things. And at the end of the day, it does not matter what those people think, and it doesn't matter for better or for worse. I am very thankful that my coworkers like me. I don't care how my previous managers feel about me, because I know the work that I did and the way that I comport myself in those roles and the work that I do is good. So whatever you need to do as whoever is listening to love yourself fully and build a life that makes you fulfilled, regardless of the job that you are filling, that is what I would say is important. And that's hard. That's like a big, hard thing to do.
It is. It really is.
Because, yeah, it requires, like, we got to ask some hard questions of ourselves. You'll be better off for asking those questions and being honest with yourself about them. And then separately, pour yourself into something that makes you feel good. I've started, like, taking care of my health because, like, I need to. Being a game dev is not always kind to our physical bodies. We're very sedentary in our work sometimes. So going to the gym, and like something I got back into is like unboxing for the first time in years. And the validation I get from just getting stronger, being more competent, and like the validation that I would normally maybe want from a manager, I'm getting from my coach, because my coach actually sees the work that I'm doing in a very simple, direct way, and is going to guide me towards that. So like finding the ways that you need validation, like maybe you need to spend more time with your partner. Maybe you need to spend more time with your mentors outside of work. Maybe you need to spend more time with your family. Maybe you need to pick up a hobby. Maybe you need to put down a hobby. Yeah. Maybe you need to re-find an old hobby. Like, my advice would be, work is not your life. You got to build a life outside of work, as hard as that is for us as game devs, because God, is it hard to make a life outside of video games when we make them and we play them and we talk about them and we are in community around them. Like, it's hard. It is so worth it. Because, yeah, like, if I didn't build up all this other stuff and make sure that I loved myself and that I believe in myself and I have the confidence to know that, like, something will come through. Like, I will figure stuff out. Like, that has made a bunch of stuff that is harder and suckier than a layoff easier. And that's to say that layoffs still suck. Like, I don't want to downplay how much layoffs suck. They are world ending. Like, financially, they are stressful. So with that in mind, I'm saying the layoffs are the least bad thing I've had to deal with lately. So shore up yourself, fill your own cup. It's hard, but it's worth it. And I don't think that we as game devs do it enough.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I mean, on this show, so far this will be episode 6. We're 6 episodes in. We've heard a lot of really great advice, but it's all, weird toward the job hunt, geared toward, resume tip or networking or whatever. And that's not a thing that I feel like we're talking enough about yet, as far as just taking care of yourself, I think that's really important. Hey, Kai, listen, thank you so much again for being on the show. This has been great talking to you. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch on LinkedIn.
Yeah, me too. Can I squeeze one more kind of more concise? I won't ramble this time.
Absolutely. Go for it.
So in regards to, this is the thing that I prepped that I was like, oh my goodness, of course I've forgotten to say it. in the vein of like advice other people are taking, if the hard thing of filling your cup is not what you can do, what I would say is rest after a layoff. Layoff advice. The day after you get laid off, you should mourn. You got to feel it. You got to get together with the people that were laid off with you or whoever your support network is. You got to feel it. It sucks.
Yeah.
And the second thing, you got to like do that for like a week and then apply for your unemployment benefits.
Yeah.
Period. Like the day you get laid off, it varies state to state. But so far as I understand it, this is true for Texas. I think it's true nationwide. I could be incorrect. But the day you apply and your application gets approved, you can be back paid for your unemployment stuff. And using those tools is a way to make sure that you survive through it. Like knowing where your next meal is going to be, how you're going to pay rent, like your unemployment is predicated on how much you were paid in your previous job. So the only two things you need to do when you get laid off is feel that shit for a while. And then the day you get laid off, apply for unemployment. Don't worry about anything else. Just get your application in, and then don't worry about applications. Don't worry about resumes.
Yeah.
Feel it for a little bit. So
take some time.
More concise version of that advice.
That's also fantastic advice. I mean, again, just the theme being take care of yourself. And that's what that means, it's just take your time, go slow, and then as you're feeling ready to ramp things up, go for it. But yeah, hey Kai, again, thank you so much. That's great advice, great tips. I love it. Yeah, really appreciate you being on. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. It's been a great time. I appreciate it. Look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah. All right, guys, we are here with Kevin. Kevin has been in the games industry for about 10 and a half years, I believe you said, right, Kevin?
It's been about 11 years.
11 years.
From 2012 to about 2023 at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we've been sitting here talking for a little while, and you've got a great story, I think, Kevin. And just tell us your story, kind of give us some background on sort of what your layoff situation was like, what your job hunt's been like, all that kind of stuff.
So a little background before my layoff situation. I started back in 2012 at LucasArts as a QA tester, and then I did a bunch of contract work for several years. And I didn't really become full-time, like actual full-time until I got to Cloud Imperium Games, which is where I started. I went there in 2012, became a embedded QA tester for our character tech team after about November 2022. And then that's when I got promoted to technical designer, and tech designer was what they actually call it. And I was in that field for about like 9 months, and at first I wasn't sure if I was going that field, but it actually piqued my interest. So I was in that position for about 9 months until I got laid off in August of 2023. And then I've been job hunting ever since, and I've only had about one job right now I want one interview so far for like a tech job since then. So, and I've just been having a different other part-time job in the meantime.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that. Tell me about that sort of getting, August 2023, that's a long time. And I mean, we're hearing, I think everybody knows that the industry's in a pretty rough spot right now. And, everybody's job hunt right now is taking longer than it normally would. You're at it nearly a year and a half now. I mean, yeah, you mentioned to me before we started recording your part-time job. Talk a little bit about that and just sort of some of the strategies you've kind of employed to kind of, keep things going.
So like basically when I first got laid off back in August 2023, I just started I didn't realize how bad the situation was going to be. So I just started applying, just keep applying like normally I do, like how I did any past job. But I had to change my strategy a little bit once it got to once it went from August to December of 2023, it got until early 2024. And that's when I was on unemployment, then my unemployment was about to start running off. So that's when I spoke to family, and then that's when one of my siblings, she was like, oh, maybe to look to a different type of part-time job. That's when I have my current part-time job right now. I've been there since middle of April 2024. And then I realized that when I started after I've been on my part-time job a little bit, I've been starting going to LinkedIn a little more frequently to sort of that's the best, that and Indeed.com to see if I could find any of the sort of jobs of what fits my skill set. So I learned after talking to some people, after I talked to a couple of people, I learned how to update my resume a little because my resume was apparently 4 years outdated. So I had to update my resume, which I did not realize I had to do. It was okay. So also I'm a streamer, so I found one person through streaming because they found me on my channel. So her and I started talking, and then she gave me some guidance, and then another person who was a recruiter, who I've been talking to very frequently. It's interesting that when we first started talking, she's also a recruiter, but she lives in a different country, and she actually got laid off from her position 2 days prior to us started trying to talk, and we were talking on video recording sessions. So my experience with it is just it's been my to answer the question to my it's been a very different experience from what it was in the past. And so what I mean by that is that is like back like in the mid 2010s and stuff like that, it was much easier for me to find a QA job. But ever since I was looking for both a QA job and a tech designer position, just whichever position I could find, it's been a lot more difficult. Like it's changed, like all these layoffs happening. Even when I apply for regular QA tester positions, I've been rejected. And I don't know if it's because of the amount of experience I have. So it's a lot more difficult like that. I understand I've seen people post on LinkedIn about how they struggle with finding a job, and I completely get where they're coming from. I've been out for about like we were saying earlier. I've been out for about a year and a half now, looking for a tech job, and I've only had one interview for recently. I was like maybe a week and a half ago. I had my first tech job industry position interview, and I've applied to dozens and dozens and dozens of positions, even jobs that maybe it's for like a podcast, or it's for something that like I was told like, oh, you have streaming skills, maybe you should apply for some marketing roles, which I never thought. But I'm like, hey, I'm down for, to be on camera. I've done that before. I've experienced with it. I'm down for that. So I'm totally capable of going beyond my normal boundaries with QA and tech design, just to, if I have to go down different paths. So that's like been my pathway is, I might have to look into a sort of different, pathway.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, it's tough. It's just, you go for that long looking, and eventually you just sort of, I mean, I'm kind of in that, to be completely transparent with you and with everybody listening, I'm kind of in that spot right now where I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, so I totally get it. Let me ask you this. Have you joined any communities? Like, Amir Satvat has a really great Discord community. Have you looked into anything like that?
I actually have. I have actually. There's someone named Haley who I actually started talking to her. I talked to her like a couple weeks. We started talking a couple weeks ago actually, and she was offering coffee chats, and we actually talked on a 15-minute coffee chat, and she's like, oh, we're done talking. She actually's like, hey, let me go ahead and send you a few links to some Discord servers. So I joined Amir's. I saw that I saw him gain that award, the Gaming Awards, which I think he highly deserves.
That was great.
From the Game Changer Award, he definitely deserves that. After especially what he's done, like he's gotten people 3,000 jobs. That is a huge boost in morale. Like I would say, thank you to Amir for doing that. I know, like I don't know him personally, but I think that's wonderful that he's helping people out like that way. I have also joined a Discord server called like Gaming Industry Coffee Chat or something like that. I joined I had to take a look at Discord, which other servers I'm in, but I've joined like 4 or 5 so far that I've grouped up the same gaming industry related. So I've joined like 4 or 5 of them. I want to interact with some more people there because like there's one person who we started talking, and then he DM'd me later on. This guy who's in the gaming industry, he's like, oh hey, I really enjoyed that. When we were talking, just sort of your story about where your place at. He's like, oh, I'd love to talk to you more at a later time if you mind, if we can chat on a different conversation. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm like, yeah, I told him let me, because I guess my when I was working at Ubisoft San Francisco, that piqued his interest when the whole layoff situation happened. So I told him this is my base on, like, because I worked at that studio several years ago. He's like, oh, we should totally chat. Like, we haven't yet, but I told him, hey, just let me know later on whenever you're free to do one. I'm totally down for talking to more people. So to answer that question from earlier, like, yes, I enjoyed Discord servers. I wish I could spend more time in just between. I've been juggling a lot between job hunting, working my part-time job, which has been super busy the past few months because it's the holiday season. Also, I do content creation or streaming, so I juggle that in my schedule. Just a lot to juggle around while
I totally get it.
And
I totally get it, man.
And I totally get everyone's stress. So like that, I've been there. I was wondering, oh, how am I going to pay bills next month? What am I going to do? And you get to the point of financial situation of like, what am I going to do? Because there's so many people who are wondering where, like, it used to be the point where the game industry, and sorry if this is like a little bit off topic, it's to the point where in the game industry it used to be so stable that you'd be able to move to the place, be able to move to the state or the country where the job is located. You move to where the job's at. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, it's tough to make a big move in this climate for sure.
Exactly.
One thing you said there's kind of that is sort of putting a pin on why I ask you that is just the networking. Like I know I've mentioned on the show before, I've had a lot of work or I've had a lot of luck inviting contacts and people out to lunch, or even just having quick 30-minute chats with anybody that sort of piques my interest as somebody that, hey, I want to learn from you, or I'd like to get to know you, or just anything like that, so that's good that you're doing that. Keep that up. And I mean, I would encourage you to even go further and seek out a few people per week that you can just talk to and just network with, because the networking part is so crucial, and it'll help so much.
Oh, what you just said is like, I've actually been, I kind of did that like several years ago. I started using LinkedIn a lot. Then when I got busy with a job, I wasn't using it as much, but I've been trying to use it much more now.
Yeah.
And I've actually made more connections. I even when I see a job posted, I say, hey, my skills don't fit this position, but I told them if it's a recruiter at Epic Games or a recruiter at such and such, I said, hey, is it cool we still connect? Is it cool if I send you a connection? And if there's reply that, yeah, sure thing, go ahead.
That's great.
And I've made I haven't really checked out how many connections I've made, but I have made a lot more connections, like recruiters and people who I've even for example too, there was like a senior environment artist. I think she used to work at Blizzard. I had to look at her profile again. And so I commented on her art, her Diablo art one day. I was like, oh, this looks super cool. And I told her that I was joking, say, oh, okay, this makes me want to play Diablo again. It's like, just like, I'm glad this is super effective of that. I'm like, and so I sent her, I'm like, okay, this person's impressed me. I sent her a connection. She accepted. So, I'm like, this person's impressed me with this. So like, I like that sort of humor of like, you can make a joke. And
that's exactly how you do it. That's exactly how you do it right there. A lot of people are like, oh man, networking is really intimidating and I don't really know how to reach out and how to initiate. That's exactly how you do it.
So
you just find a common interest.
So for my advice for everyone listening to this, if you're intimidated, I get it. I've been like that in the past. I've had to learn to just basically take a deep breath like this. You just have to believe in yourself, have confidence. The whole point of like getting that job interview and getting that job and networking, you gotta be confident in yourself. You can't be afraid. I know sometimes when I'm like, for example, I just gave my mom this example earlier today. There's a big YouTuber who I met earlier last year. I was like, there was a line from we were watching, when we were attending this video game music conference orchestra, and we both really like Final Fantasy VII, so the new game Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So I was like, should I show you or not? And then I was like, you know what? I just gotta go in the line and meet him. I met him. We kind of shook hands. I took a photo with him, and I conquered my fear and I talked to him for a little bit. And then and so that's like you gotta especially go to these other events that to meet people. I understand some people might be a little intimidated, like, oh, is this person gonna enjoy talking to me? I understand that. I've been in that situation before. However, you gotta be, again, keys are confident, believe in yourself, and you just gotta say, either you'll vibe with the person or you won't. You're not gonna vibe with every single person. Oh,
yeah.
I don't vibe with every, like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but like, there are times where I feel like, oh, I'm gonna vibe with this person, but then they don't vibe with me right away. But later on, it might be like, oh, you might vibe or develop a connection over a different subject layer at a later time. It's all about It's all about the timing. And if anyone's wondering about that, that's how you do it. Like, you just have confidence. You just talk to them. If something's meant to happen at the time, great. If not, maybe at a later time, you two will bond over something. That's happened to me plenty of times with so many people, because sometimes I'll be like, oh, this person didn't want to bond with me. Then later on, it's like 3 months later, we'll bond over something, and then we'll start, chatterbox over it. And I'm like, it's you gotta just be, again, I know I've repeated this, but confident, believe in yourself, can't be intimidated by other people. That's how you, like you said, Joe, that's how you make connections. And you just also send that message out saying, hey, you just make it very casual, saying, hey, do you mind if we connect? I can't apply to this job at this moment, but is it cool if I seek any? I usually just put as, is it cool if we connect and I could contact you about any future opportunities? That leaves the door open, and if they say sure, they connect, great, that's awesome. If not, don't worry about, just move on with your life. Maybe later on, you'll comment on a post or something like that and that they made, and then maybe later on you'll connect them or something. You're not gonna connect or bond with every single person you meet out there. That's not humanly possible.
100%.
In my experience. So so that's based on my experience with it so far.
That's really great advice. And actually, as you're talking, I'm thinking of a tool that I've been using. I may have mentioned this in a past episode, but there's a tool out there called Hunter, Huntr. You know how tech loves to take the vowels out of everything these days. But if you haven't checked that out, you should. And you guys listening, check out Hunter for sure, because it's a great app that not only lets you tailor your resumes really easily to jobs like that, and it sort of walks you through the process in some really good ways, but it also has sort of a Notion style job tracker board section, so that you can sort of basically create a job on the board, and then you can, from that card that you can create a tailored resume, walk through that whole process, then download the resume. And by the way, this is all in the free version. They have an updated or an upgraded premium version that you can use as well, but I've just been using the free version. They're not sponsoring this episode, by the way, so this is not an ad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a cool app, and I had a friend turn me onto it, and I've really been enjoying it. So I've been telling people about it. So check that out if you get a chance, and that might be really helpful. As it just makes creating those tailored resumes a lot easier.
One other thing I was taught by some of these people too, what also helps too, is ChatGPT. You can just type it hey, say they taught me the first person, she taught me how to use it, and then the second person is yeah, you can do that too. And you just basically, they taught me how to write in ChatGPT, how to tailor your resume, because that's exactly what you gotta do right now. Until the market approves, you gotta do it, or else just that way your resume clicks out. I'll admit, I had to edit my resume a little more statistics, because apparently there are a lot of LinkedIn posts that recruiters saying they love statistics, I helped with 25% of this
kind of thing,
they with metrics and stuff like that. They love seeing metrics because that really catches their eye.
Yeah, no, that's amazing advice. Very good. I mean, sometimes that seems obvious to some of us, and it's not, and it needs to be said. As simple and obvious as that sounds, sometimes it's got to be said. But hey, listen, Kevin, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm hoping that you sharing your story will encourage other people to want to share their stories too with me. And I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you so much, Joe, for having me on. I always enjoy talking about this, sharing my personal experiences, especially with everyone who's sharing on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I actually had fun doing this, and appreciate you just sharing this knowledge.
Absolutely, man. All right, I think that's going to about do it for episode 6 of the Game Industry Job Hunt podcast. Once again, I want to thank my guests, Kai and Kevin, for coming on and sharing their stories. I really appreciate it. Hey, if you are listening to this and you want to share your story with me, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love to get as many voices as we can here on the show, sharing what's been happening with them and how things are going. I think it helps everybody when we do that. So yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn and let's talk. Again, remember, please leave the show a good review wherever you're listening to this. Visit GameIndustryJobHunt.com for all sorts of goodies, including show notes, resources, links, what have you. And yeah, with that, keep pushing. We'll talk to you next time.